All right, everybody, welcome back. Sports Bash is live on a happy hour Friday. Pete Thompson joins us at 5 o'clock. Jeff Kerr next hour as well. But right now, the Phillies getting ready. Man, I am mad at myself, Bob Wankel. I did not prepare. I should be going to Dunedin, hop on a flight, and check out a couple of Phillies games as they're getting ready to take on the Blue Jays in Dunedin, where the Blue Jays are calling home, at least for the next couple of weeks before they head to Buffalo. What's up, man?
What's going on? That would be a nice mid-May trip. Usually you take that in late February, early March, but man, it'd be perfect right now.
Unbelievable. Yeah, Blue Jays are playing in Dunedin, which is the town over from Clearwater Beach where the Phillies train. That is where they're playing their home games, and the Phillies take on the Blue Jays here after kind of a lackluster performance yesterday, but they kind of got the monkey off their back with that road win. So it was almost like, hey, we won a road series, let's party it up, and then they showed up flat on Thursday.
Yeah, you can't ask them to check all the boxes in one series, right? I mean, it was the first time since the end of the 2019 season where they finally won a road series, a 3-game road series. It was 600 days had gone by, wow. 602 days had gone by since they had done that. So they did check that box, but they still have not yet to sweep a 3-game road series going all the way back to April of 2018. It's been more than 3 calendar years. So they'll get another shot at it starting tonight when they head down to Florida and play the Blue Jays. But, you know, the Phillies can downplay it all they want. Zach Wheeler said he never thought about it. Aaron Nola said that he doesn't think about the road struggles all that much. Joe Girardi said kind of kiddingly that the only reason why he thinks about it is because we keep asking him about it. Mm-hmm. But there's something to be said for it. I mean, those guys are lying if they're saying that they don't think about it or they're not aware of the fact that they've struggled so heavily and so much on the road.
Well, they're on the road in Dunedin, as you said, against this Blue Jays team, but some things have happened over the last week here. You know, center field was a huge topic of conversation. March, April, they've made changes after changes, and then we finally have seen a little bit of Odubel Herrera kind of grabbing this thing a little bit. As he grabbed it enough for them to say, he's our guy, because Bryce Harper evidently says he's our guy.
Yeah, that was definitely the strongest public endorsement of Odubel Herrera by anybody, certainly in the clubhouse, and really anybody in the organization to this point. After he hit the game-tying home run on Wednesday night, and to be honest with you, yes, I think that he's done enough to certainly earn the opportunity over the next month or two to prove that that's not a position that they're going to need to address. Over the last 9 games, I believe it is now, he's hitting over 300. His OPS is over 900. He's had some key hits and big spots for this team. Still makes some head-scratching plays out in the field. That's kind of his MO. That's his deal. But certainly when you look at the production overall, he's been pretty good. And certainly when you compare it to what they were getting up until, the last 10 days or so. So in my opinion, the Phillies have so many different holes that they need to address potentially if they want to try to go for it, so to speak, in the second half here at the trade deadline, that Odubel Herrera, I think, is at least doing enough right now where the Phillies are going to say, hey, here's 2 months to show us for real that you can do this.
It's interesting because on the broadcast the other night, John Kruk was like, he's got to be hitting higher in the lineup. I'm like, let's hold our horses here. Moving him, and he wanted to move him to 5th in the lineup. And I'm like, I don't know. This is a guy who hasn't played baseball in a couple of years, live major league pitching. He had, some winter league stuff. But the interesting part about Odubel is, at his best, he batted leadoff or the 3-hole. They are the 2 spots he has hit the most in his career. So, do you like him staying at 8, producing lower in the lineup, or is he a guy with the way this lineup is going that should maybe be considered to be moved up? Because, again, he has been a top-of-the-order guy, not a bottom-of-the-order guy.
Yeah, well, part of the reason he's been a top-of-the-order guy in the past is because he's been a part of lineups that just weren't very good. So you do have to keep that in mind. The answer to that question, I think, is going to be determined by whether or not this team has Didi Gregorius back soon and whether or not it has JT Realmuto in the lineup back soon. And if those guys are out, then, yeah, I think out of necessity, you would have to move up Odubel Herrera. The biggest problem, though, is if you look at the RBI production, I think we talked about this the other day from Bryce Harper, it just hasn't been there. And part of the reason is because they've been inconsistent in setting the table for him. So, yeah, if Odubel Herrera were to get hot, is that something that you might consider bringing him up in the lineup, maybe putting a couple guys on, or getting a hotter bat in front of Bryce Harper to maybe try to maximize his RBI opportunities? Maybe. But I think if this Phillies lineup is operating as it's supposed to, Odubel Herrera hitting 7th or 8th is probably the optimal slot for him. And like you said, He's a guy that still has not played Major League Baseball or had many at-bats over the last 2 years. Just because a guy's going well, sometimes because a guy's going well, it's reason not to move him. Let him be comfortable and own a certain slot in the lineup rather than bumping him all over the place. But like we said, if Realmuto and Gregorius are out for an extended period of time, they're going to have to move him up, because they really have just no other choice.
Yeah, and, the other day we saw them move their lineup around a little bit. Speaking of which, they finally dropped Hoskins out of the lineup, out of the 2 spot. Is that a permanent move? Is that something that's been brought up? And he went from 2 to 7. That was a pretty precipitous drop, and then he moved back up into the 4th spot. But are they done with Rhys Hoskins in the 2-hole?
I don't want to say, they're done, but I do think that he's a guy that's really struggled. He had a big hit on Wednesday night, to be fair. But when you look at his at-bats and take a large sample here over the last week and a half, he's really struggled. Really, since they've left Colorado, he just has not been very good. And one of the things that you could always say about Rhys Hoskins was that when things weren't going well, the on-base skills were there. He'd still take walks. He'd find a way to get on for you. But that really hasn't been the case this season. He's a little bit more aggressive at the plate. He's swinging a lot more frequently. The walks are down. And so if those on-base skills aren't going to be there and he's not putting up those numbers, then there's really no reason to hit him second. He's not an ideal number 2 hitter to begin with. So, if the walks aren't going to be there, there's no reason to bat him that high in the order. He's got to figure it out. I kind of almost look at Rhys Hoskins like a guy that is sort of an embodiment of what the Phillies have been now over the last 3 years or so. He's a guy that at times can look really good, just like the Phillies themselves can look really good. And then there are times where he just goes into these prolonged stretches where he can't figure it out, much like this team hasn't been able to do since the start of 2018. And I really just think that he's got to find a way to become a more consistent player if he wants to be a long-term solution in this lineup, especially when you consider the fact that he's just not very good defensively.
Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, is with us here. Our look at the Phillies. They're down in Dunedin, but one guy who's not is JT Realmuto. He's entering the COVID protocol, and yesterday Girardi, I guess, said that he had a stomach ache and a fever in the game last night. It coincided with him taking, or 2 nights ago, coincided with him taking one off the knee there. So is this a creative way to not have to put him on the injured list, or because he did not travel to Dunedin, so he will not play the entire weekend, but do we expect to see him back sooner or later? Do you think this is more with that knee? Because he stayed in the game.
Yeah, so he stayed in the game initially and then was replaced by Andrew Knapp late. Didn't play yesterday. And then both before and after the game yesterday, Joe Girardi said that he was feeling under the weather, had a stomach issue, a little bit of a headache, was tested negative for COVID. There are some protocols in place here. I would be surprised if he got down there in time for tonight's game, but Joe Girardi did not close the door on the idea of him traveling separately to Dunedin to play either Saturday or Sunday. And, they have Marchand up. That's fine. But, ideally you don't want him in and you don't want to catch Andrew Knapp 5 or 6 straight days. So, no, I don't think it has anything to do with manipulating the roster because of the knee contusion that he suffered the other night. I do think it's more just that in 2021, things being what they are right now, you have to be ultra cautious. And so he's in protocol. And I think it's probably a safer bet that you'll see him at the beginning of next week, so long as he doesn't test positive. But I do think it's possible he gets down there and plays this weekend. These are big games for the Phillies.
Any concern about Didi and that elbow, which was Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago, and that's what's keeping him out right now?
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some level of concern when you consider he had the Tommy John surgery. He missed 3 games at the end of April over a 5-day stretch. Since he's come back off that injury, he has not been as productive, has not driven the ball quite as well. And now he's out again. And, it's a situation where I think you have to be somewhat worried. And, I got to say, if he were to miss an extended period of time or, it were even worse, where we're looking at a more catastrophic injury, that would be devastating to this lineup, despite how well Nick Maton has played. I mean, I just don't think that that's a guy that you want starting 6 games a week for you. And considering what Scott Kingery looks like right now, my goodness, it would be a really difficult injury for this team to sustain.
You mentioned Kingery and just is he just a lost soul at this point? I mean, is it just hey, we messed this whole thing up?
When you consider what the expectations were for the player, I would say, and I at the expense of sounding like I'm delivering the ultimate hot take here, I would challenge you to think about this. Is Scott Kingery one of the worst 15 Phillies over the last 15 years? And I mean, like the guys that jump out at me would be someone like Michael Martinez, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go, and I'm talking about like a multi-season Philly, a guy that's been here for more than 1 year. When you look at those numbers right now, you're talking about a guy since the start of the 2020 season is hit below 150. He's striking out in roughly 30% of his at-bats. He struck out in 8 of his 14 at-bats this season. He has 1 hit. He can't catch up to a 93-mile-an-hour belt-high fastball, and not to pile on the kid, but again, when you consider what he was supposed to be,
Yeah.
hard not to be disappointed in what he's done.
Extremely disappointed, Bob. I mean, I was all for, like, hey, I love the fact that the Phillies were aggressive, saw a young guy and said, we believe in you. We're not going to try to circumvent this whole keeping you down for service time. They said, we got a guy. Let's reward him. He had an unbelievable spring. I was there live saying, man, this kid's hitting everything right back up the middle. How do you keep this kid? And they rewarded him. And what he has become, you're right, 93 miles per hour. And it's in his face. I can't hit this fastball. He looks back at that pitcher almost like, how'd you do that? I used to be able to do this all the time. He is absolutely lost.
Yeah, and contextually, they're not doing him any favors either. He should not be up here, and I think he knows it.
And he hits the triple that night to win the game. He finally gets some positivity, and then they call him up.
Yeah, to me, the only way that you could potentially fix him is to say, we will see you in a few months. Maybe we'll see you next year. We're going to give you 3-4 months to go down there, try to reinvent yourself, try to find what it is you lost. And I think that there's 2 things that can be true here. He is not a Major League Baseball player right now. He's totally lost. But what you saw a few spring trainings ago, what you saw the season before in the minor leagues in 2017, I might have said it to you, but John Clark, if you go back to the 2017 season, you look at John Clark, who is not known as a, minor league baseball savant. He was nightly tweeting Scott Kingery highlights because he was that good. He was the next big thing. It was real, man. But he has lost it because, whether it be the positional stuff when he first came up being mishandled, whether he tried to, the Phillies wanted him to be more of a lift hitter, and that kind of eroded his confidence and messed with his track. Whether he's just, going through something else entirely, maybe off the field, who knows? But he is a wreck right now, and there's no way he can be up here getting 2-3 at-bats a week if he's trying to fix it.
That's my favorite tweet of the day, by the way. It's a Peter Gammons tweet. Mike Trout having arguably his best season of his career, and his launch angle is the lowest of his career.
Yeah.
Put those 2 things together. How about it? All right, Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, Phillies, Blue Jays, Dunedin, Florida. Stop at the Dunedin Smokehouse if you are planning to head down there, or head over to Clearwater Beach and go to the Bait House and get yourself a grouper sandwich. Bob Wankel, always a pleasure, man.
Talk to you soon, man.
And that's Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad here on the Happy Hour Friday. We will come back with a Happy Hour Friday edition of the PT coming up next right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. The Sports Bash is brought to you by East Coast Roofing, Siding, Windows, serving all of South Jersey. If you call, they'll show up online, eastcoastroofing.com. Don't forget NFL with Jeff Kerr at 525, but the PT's here for Happy Hour Friday, and that's next.